On World News Tonight, Saturday, the long vigil is over. Pope John Paul II has died. Around the world tonight, they are remembering one man's contribution to humanity.
From ABC News, this is World News Tonight, Saturday.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bob Woodruff. As many of you probably know by now, Pope John Paul II died this afternoon. He passed away at 2:37 p.m. Eastern Time in his apartment overlooking St. Peter's Square, where thousands of people have been gathering to offer their prayers and at times simply to stand in silence and light a candle. This is a live picture just outside of St. Peter's Basilica. John Paul was 84 years old and had been Pope for nearly 27 years. His influence as head of the Roman Catholic Church extended well beyond the Catholic faithful. He was an inspiration to many non-Catholics as well. We'll have more on that later in our broadcast, but right now ABC's David Wright is at the Vatican with more on how this remarkable day has unfolded. David?
Good evening, Bob. Tonight, the Pope's Chamberlain, the Camerlengo, locked the doors of the papal apartment and broke the Pope's seals and rings, the first in a series of complicated rituals that follow the death of a Pope. But news that this solemn transition had taken place first broke in an email message. The email message from the papal spokesman said, "The Holy Father died this evening at 9:37 p.m. in his private apartment." It took only a few moments for the news to reach St. Peter's Square. Archbishop Leonardo Sandri said, "Dearest brothers and sisters, our beloved Father has gone to the house of his Father." Then Cardinal Angelo Sodano called for silence for the first few moments of his meeting with our Lord. The crowd here did not need to be asked. Then they clapped. Appreciation for John Paul, an Italian tradition, but many in the crowd were crying. And then the bells. The spiritual father of 1 billion people, the first Polish pope in history, had his own more private ceremony early this morning. A group of Polish monks brought 2 golden crowns to the crypts of St. Peter's Basilica. On his deathbed, John Paul had blessed these crowns, and his dying wish was that they be placed on the Black Madonna, the most sacred Polish icon. John Paul described her as his mother. Inscribed with the Pope's motto, Totus Tuus, always yours, a parting gift from a loving son. Here in Rome and around the world, he is survived by a devoted family. Here in St. Peter's Square, the crowd is still gathered, absorbing this news. Tomorrow morning, Cardinal Sodano will say Mass there. Then on Monday, the Pope's body will move to the Basilica, where it will lie in state. Italy is now in the midst of 3 days of mourning. Bob?
And the Pope's surrounded by his devoted family, as you said. David Wright at Vatican City. Thanks. It is difficult to gauge these kinds of things, but perhaps nowhere is the emotion of this moment more intense than in Pope John Paul's homeland, Poland. He was the first pope to come from a Slavic country, and for Poles, he was, without question, a national hero. ABC's Jim Sciutto is in Krakow.
The news of his death was devastating here. People stopped where they stood and held each other. There was complete silence. "I have no words to speak," he said. "I cannot say a thing." Then the tears. Many had told us they were praying for an end to the Pope's suffering. The news he was gone was too much for them. "I cannot imagine a world without this Pope," she said. "I thought I was prepared for this, but I was not." The dark square outside his former residence in Krakow was slowly illuminated by dozens, then hundreds of candles. So many Poles feel a personal connection to the Pope, and tonight many told us they feel like they've lost a member of their own family. In Krakow, where he was bishop and then cardinal, and more than anywhere else in his nearby hometown of Wodowice. Today in St. Mary's Church, where he was baptized 84 years ago, Worshippers prayed for a peaceful end. Together with the Pope, said the priest in his sermon, we are all experiencing the mystery of life that is death. Tonight, that mystery is more raw and sorrowful than many here imagined possible. Jim Shudo, ABC News, Krakow.
It was especially profound in Poland, but also in other parts of the world. There were words of reverence and praise from the most powerful leaders, as well as from some of the poorest people on earth. They have all been inspired by John Paul. ABC's Bob Jamieson reports on the outpouring of emotions in this country.
In the small Illinois town of Plano, parishioners went to St. Mary's Catholic Church in a steady stream today.
Hail Mary.
First to pray for the Pope's recovery, and then for something else.
My prayers have been that he dies a peaceful death, a very peaceful death, and I think he did.
I think what he's done in the last 26-some years is going to continue to resound as a bell clanging.
In Washington, the flag at the Capitol flew at half-staff, as did the flag over the White House, where President Bush called the Pope not just a shepherd of the church, but a champion of freedom.
We will always remember the humble, wise, and fearless priest who became one of history's great moral leaders.
The president, who attended Mass a short time ago at St. Matthew's Cathedral, is expected to attend the funeral. Elsewhere in Washington, black bunting was quickly hung on the National Shrine for the Immaculate Conception, helping to spread the news of the Pope's death.
Anyone who gave his life so totally, so completely, so beautifully to other people, has to have a great place in heaven.
Peace be with you.
At New York's St. Patrick's Cathedral, Cardinal John Egan, who will vote on John Paul's successor, led the evening Mass. The Pope had long been praised here for teaching the value and dignity of life, and where today he was praised for showing dignity in the face of death.
We pray because for me especially, he's one of the most important Pope of the history.
Throughout the Catholic world, there was, of course, sadness, but also the Christian view that Pope John Paul is now in a better place. Bob Jamieson, ABC News, New York.
And we will have much more on the life of the man considered holy to 1 billion people when we come back. As the 265th Pope, John Paul was a groundbreaker. He was the first non-Italian pope in more than 450 years. He traveled more and named more saints than all other popes combined. But his life was remarkable long before he became the head of the Roman Catholic Church. Here's ABC's Bill Blakemore.
His first 18 years were spent in one quiet place, Wadowice, a small town in the foothills of the mountains of southern Poland. Born here in 1920, Karol Wojtyła had some hard lessons early. His mother died when he was 8, his only sibling, a much older brother, when he was 12. His teens were spent living alone with his father, a retired army officer who cared for his son in their tiny apartment. Just outside the boys' window, the church window. Townfolk remembered him as bright, athletic, but always with a serious side. The joys of university life, with new friends and professors in Krakow, he had for 1 year. Then, the Nazis invaded Poland. His professors sent to concentration camps. Around him, Nazi horrors. The region's Jews jammed into the Krakow ghetto, then sent to Auschwitz, only 15 miles from Wojtyła's hometown. When his father died suddenly of a heart attack, he had no family left. At some point, in the midst of his own sadness and the Nazi terrors around him, he decided to become a priest and joined illegal seminary classes. When the Nazis swept Krakow, arresting every male between 15 and 50, he escaped into hiding in the Archbishop's palace, where he stayed until the Soviets arrived. And the oppressions of Hitler were replaced by those of Stalin. But the young priest escaped to freedom, sent by his church in 1946 to study for 2 years in Rome. The world opened up for him. His gift for languages flourished. He earned a PhD. Then, back in Poland, he became a professor of ethics. At the age of 38, he was made a bishop. Wojtyła rose through the ranks in Poland. In Rome, the Vatican paid new attention to his leadership qualities.
Habemus Papam, Cardinalem Wojtyła.
In 1978, the cardinals elected him the first non-Italian pope in 455 years.
Ma ho fatto nel spirito dell'ubbidienza.
His beaming personality took the world by storm, attracting the largest crowds yet assembled on earth, more than any politician could dream of. And he declared, politics is the church's business when it involves how people treat people. His first return to Poland pierced the Iron Curtain. Poles later said what they really discovered when he came was themselves, unified in those crowds. John Paul called for independence. The Solidarity movement caught fire. In America, the Pope who played tough with the Soviets was John Paul Superstar. Americans also learned he was just as tough on questions of personal morality. No artificial birth control, no premarital sex, no abortion.
We will stand up and proclaim that no one ever has the authority to destroy unborn life.
Everyone was astonished at his ability to undermine dictatorships in the name of freedom.
We meet you not with pride, but with humility and on bended knees.
When a Turkish gunman shot and nearly killed him in St. Peter's Square in 1981, high-level rumors in the Vatican said the Soviets did it, furious about solidarity in Poland. He recovered and returned to Poland, now under martial law. He urged solidarity leaders not to overreact, to go slowly. He insisted their freedom movement had to remain nonviolent if it was to work. Eventually, in 1989, the communists gave in and asked for negotiations with the Solidarity Trade Union. Within months, the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Empire came apart, peacefully.
You were the force to light the spark of freedom over communism.
In the year 2000, he made his first papal visit to the Holy Land.
We wish to remember for a purpose, namely, to ensure that never again will evil prevail, as it did for the millions of innocent victims of Nazis.
John Paul then prayed at the Western Wall, remnant of the temple that is the most sacred spot on earth for Jews. In June 2001, John Paul became the first pope ever to step inside a mosque, the Great Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. There, at the tomb of John the Baptist, he and Muslim clerics prayed together. War is never inevitable. It's always a defeat for humanity, John Paul declared as the U.S. invasion of Iraq loomed. The key of all his arguments, whether on personal morality or political oppression, was his insistence on the inviolable dignity of every human. When human rights are violated, he said, that's when wars begin. When they're restored, wars can end. Bill Blakemore, ABC News.
We should say he was also fluent in 8 languages and spoke pieces of many others. We'll have more on this man, his legacy, and what to expect in the days ahead after this. Italy begins 3 official days of mourning for Pope John Paul starting tomorrow. His death now sets in motion a series of events that will eventually lead to the elevation of a new pope. ABC's George Stephanopoulos joins us now from the Vatican. George, I assume that the first step now is to prepare John Paul's body for viewing within St. Peter's Basilica.
That's exactly right, Bob. The rituals began tonight, as David Wright said earlier. The apartment has been sealed. His ring has been defaced and destroyed. He will go and lie in state starting Monday afternoon. On Monday afternoon, the cardinals on the church, and they are now the governing body of the church until a new pope is chosen, will also meet for the first time, leading to the funeral, which is not likely to happen before Thursday afternoon. Once the funeral takes place, there are 9 official days of mourning. And then the conclave of the cardinals who will choose the new pope will meet any time between April 17th and April 21st. That's according to the rules that John Paul himself revised in 1996.
And there's a great deal of mystery around the conclave. A lot of factors go into determining how long that will take, but we could have a pope, I suppose, after just one day of voting.
And that's exactly right. It took only 2 days for John Paul II in 1978. It hasn't taken more than 4 days since 1831. And in fact, John Paul actually has made rules which say if it goes beyond about 12 days and 30 votes, you can go from the normal 2/3 of all cardinals present to determine the new pope down to a majority vote. There are 117 cardinals eligible to choose the new pope, 114 of them are chosen by John Paul II himself. But they are going to start their deliberations formally, as I said, between April 17th and April 21st. But you can bet that those conversations informally have already begun.
Yeah, all the debate going out in the hallways, no doubt about it. Thanks, many thanks, George Stephanopoulos at the Vatican tonight. Well, Boston's former Cardinal Bernard Law will be among the guests tomorrow on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, a program note. We will continue our look back at the extraordinary life of Pope John Paul II when we come back. Finally tonight, over many years and continents, the Pope has celebrated many masses. He was just 58 when he was first elected to the papacy, spending more than 2 years of his reign on the road. The world has witnessed his long transition from a strong and athletic man to a physically faltering one, and in his very public life, the world has seen him change.
Adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini.
America needs much prayer, lest it lose its soul. Christ is knocking at many hearts, looking for young people like you.
Pope John Paul II died in his apartment at the Vatican today as thousands of people prayed and waited outside of his window. Italy now begins 3 days of mourning in preparation for his funeral. That is World News Tonight, Saturday. Tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, an ABC News special, John Paul II, Legacy of a Pope. And tomorrow, Good Morning America has the latest on John Paul's passing and what we can expect in the days ahead. I'm Bob Woodruff. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.